So as March of 2020, the whole world comes to a stop. I found myself as a corporate speaker and trainer and organizational consultant having a lot more time on my hands. So, as many did. So I decided to teach my 10-year-old nephew how to play chess. Now, I'm over there one day and I'm sitting there playing and I'm looking at my phone. Great commercial for no texting and driving because you can't play chess and text at the same time. Not paying attention, and I move my queen, and oops, I took my hand off of it. You ever have that moment? That moment in time when you're just like, oh, I'm having that moment. But I'm like, all right, you're a behavioral scientist. Focus, just pretend like nothing's happening. So I'm looking at my phone, I'm kind of looking out of the corner of my eye, and my nephew's looking at the board, he's looking at me, looks at the board, and wipes my queen off the stage. I'm like, my hands start to sweat. My heart starts beating 1,000 miles an hour. I start getting this sickness. Now, this is not the Grandmaster Championship of chess. This is me and my 10-year-old nephew. But these thoughts start coming into my brain. Just stand up and bump the table. Guess we can start over. Now, before you think I'm a monster, I didn't do that. I stopped, I looked, I was like, nice move, buddy. You might have me this time. Now, thankfully, he screwed up, and I ended up winning anyways. But that's not the moral of this story. The moral of the story is so often we have thoughts or feelings, and sometimes we don't even know where they come from. Sometimes they feel like they're foreign to us. But what if we could understand where our behaviors come from? What if we could make a better choice every single day to empower our future? And that's what this is about. This is about empowering our future by understanding the 4-Drive framework. The 4-Drive framework comes from Paul Lawrence and Nitin Noria, 2 scientists from Harvard University. They came up with this concept to say human beings, all of us, have 4 different drives. And part of the behavioral elements was mapping those drives and putting an element to it and being able to measure it. I'll tell you what the 4 drives are. The first, the drive to acquire. Think our ancient ancestors. They had to hunt, they had to gather, they had to acquire resources. That's our fire element. Very competitive, status, ego sometimes. We have the drive to defend. We had to protect our resources. We had to plan for the future. We had to get out there and make sure that our environment was going to be conducive to our survival. That's our drive to defend, our earth element. We had to learn. We had to find new tools. We had to figure out ways to do things that we haven't done before. We had to get new experiences, find new terrains. We had to invent the iPhone eventually. That's our drive to learn, our air element. And then last but not least, we had to work together. Because as a species, we were not the biggest, we were not the smartest. In fact, at that time, human beings, there was multiple species of us, but we survived. And that was part of what they wanted to understand was how did we do that when we weren't the biggest? Well, that drive to bond, that connection drive, the need for people. So what does this mean? Every single day you are faced with so many choices. And there may have been times in your life that you wanted to scream at somebody, but you chose not to. There's other times, I'll give you an example. Each of these elements, now this is where it might be a little different than a personality assessment because it's not your one or the other. These things are constantly at work, pushing and pulling on each other. Let me give you an example of this, okay? I want you to imagine that there's this giant chocolate cake brought into your break room at your workplace, and you're like, that part of your brain's like, ooh, that smells good, I want that so bad. And then you get this other little voice that's like, no, Jay, you are on a diet right now, you can't have that. And then you get this other voice like, hey, but you were walking around all day at TEDx, you've burned enough calories to have that cake. And then another voice comes in and says, yeah, but you made promises to your family, you were gonna stay on track, you don't wanna lose that. And you have this push and pull. Now, if I put that chocolate cake down in front of my pup, there is no debate. That dog is gonna go and devour that cake, regardless of whether or not that's poison, regardless of whether or not she's gonna regret it later, she is just gonna devour the cake. But that's what makes us uniquely and amazingly human, is that we can have these thoughts and feelings, and yet we can choose a behavioral pathway that's more effective. Now, what we tried to do with the behavioral elements was measure out these drives to understand maybe some of the drives don't necessarily pull at us at the same levels that others do. So we created an assessment that ultimately measures out whether we're balanced in a drive, whether there's a lowness to it, whether there's harmony, whether it goes up or down, to find out exactly how much a drive might be pulling on us. And this assessment, it took us multiple years to perfect this, to really do the research, to get in there and interview and participant observation to better understand how we're being pulled. Now, you might guess I am a fire element, very, very high fire, along with air, which means I like to innovate in order to produce results. I like to get out there and compete and win. But I also recognize that sometimes competing can come at the cost of bonding, can come at the cost of learning. I had to learn to pull back on some of those drives. And that's what behavioral elements does. It helps us be aware of how those drives are pushing and pulling us every single decision that we make. And we make in a range of 20,000 every single day. Now, one of the other things that we've done with this is we started to look at industries. We've gotten a lot of data off this. And we started to look and say, how can we help other industries really understand what's going on? Now, when we look at, say, something like education, wow. Teachers, frontline teachers have a very, very strong drive to bond, which also we come to find in our research that the drive to bond can also lead to burnout because constantly looking and taking care of other people can be exhausting. When we look at, say, something like healthcare, we've seen very similar, but a secondary drive emerges that's maybe a little bit different. We see a little bit of fire. We see that competition. We see that push forward. When we look at something like real estate, salespeople, we see a very strong drive to acquire, but also a connection to bond. They want to help people acquire their dreams at the same time acquiring theirs. We see CEOs, very strong drive to acquire, and if they're not careful, they may leave their teams behind them. When we think about nonprofits, we see a very strong drive to connect, that bond, that humanistic element. But again, we can also see a lot of that burnout. So understanding these things can really help us guide our employees, our teams, our leaders in their motivation. What do they want to accomplish? How to collaborate more effectively, how to communicate, how to make better decisions. And if we make better behavioral decisions, we will win. That's the fire speaking. Now, behavior, it is the source of success and failure. And ultimately, when you're building a culture, it is the micro behaviors that build the macro culture. It's a choice, friends. You can't just say, this is how I am. That's how you're choosing to be. Understanding these drives will help you make better choices and hopefully help you thrive and survive in our world today. Thank you so much.